Pass or Smash, Women's Health Edition. Us women are wonderfully complicated creatures, aren't we? But that can result in some pretty mixed messaging when it comes to our health. Do this, do that, don't do that. This is good for you. This is bad for you. It's hard to sort through all of that information and to filter what is really good for me personally, what is good for us as women. And so I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Micah Hubbard. She's a functional medicine nurse practitioner, and she is here to weigh in on some of the trending topics in women's health. I really appreciate her advice because she's an expert in women's health, and we're going to talk about so many things. We talk about hormone therapy, we talk about red light therapy, GLP-1 medications, mammograms, birth control, botox, cold plunging, and like I said, a lot more. It's a super fun episode. I think you're going to love it. Some of these topics are pretty controversial in the health and wellness world, so I really love the clarity that our conversation brings, and I'm excited to see what you think about it. After you listen, if this episode or any of the Daily Wellness episodes have been helpful for you, we'd really appreciate your support of the podcast. It's super simple. You can share this episode with a friend. You can go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. You can go to Apple or Spotify and follow or subscribe to the show. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And on Spotify and YouTube, you can now watch our podcast on video if that is how you like to watch podcasts. So we have lots of options and ways that you can support the show, and it means the world to us. Thanks.
Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. This is a place where busy moms can learn about healthy living. I hope that what you learn here helps you feel empowered to take the next step in your family's health journey.
Hi, Micah. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I loved kind of getting to know you a little bit online, and it seems like you are a really well-rounded practitioner. I was researching all of the certifications and trainings that you've done, which is just pretty impressive, to be honest. So it seems like you have a pretty wide knowledge base as far as natural medicine and functional medicine and things like that. But you are a functional medicine nurse practitioner. Is that how you would describe yourself, or do you go by another title?
No, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, which certification do you actually introduce yourself as when you're talking to people about what you do? Can you kind of tell us why you do what you do?
Yeah, so I've kind of always been leaning a little bit more on the natural side of things, even growing up. And I remember questioning a lot of things and thinking, well, why is it this way? And why is it that way? And when I went through nursing school, it opened up my eyes a little bit more, with certain things, how they were done. And it's like, well, why, again, why are someone was just hospitalized for pneumonia. Why are we, letting them order, hamburgers and milkshakes from the hospital cafeteria, and then before they leave, you got to make sure they have their pneumonia vaccine and their flu vaccine, and can we wait a little bit and let the immune system recover? So that kind of opened my eyes. And then when we had our first child, then I started thinking, okay, what are some first foods I should introduce? And shortly after we had our first kid, my husband got sick and had some health concerns, and it took us probably about 3 years to figure it out. He works in the medical field as well, and he was working, and I at the time was in, I think, nurse practitioner school. And so we were knowledgeable, but we really, all the traditional things, we couldn't really figure it out. So long story short, he ended up being sick from some mold exposure that was actually in his workplace. And so it really shifted our lives in a lot of ways, and is really a large reason of why I do and we do what we do today.
Mm-hmm. I know you guys have a lot of different practitioners in your clinic. What is your specialty, and kind of how do you decide which clients you see versus, go to somebody else or whatnot?
Yeah, we do have a range. We have 7 other practitioners besides myself in our office. And so we we all think similarly and do things similarly, but we do have different trainings and backgrounds and things like that. So we try to screen our patients, when they come in initially to figure out, okay, what are your concerns? Because we do have some people that see us for, a newborn visit or a well baby visit, and those aren't too complex. And then we have other, hey, I've been to every specialist you could think of. I've been to the Mayo Clinic, and people still cannot figure out what's wrong with me. And so we try to screen people, figure out what are you looking for, what's going on, who may be the best fit. So I tend to see the more complex patients that walk through the doors that have been a little bit of everywhere and still aren't really getting answers of what's going on with them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's becoming more common. I mean, Americans are really sicker than we have ever been. A lot of moms and women listening to this podcast. And so, people in general in America are sicker, but also that relates to women specifically are sicker, I'm sure. What kind of trends are you seeing in women's health?
Yeah, so I do definitely, I actually see a large majority of women. I do see children as well, but probably a large percentage of my practice is women. So I do a lot with women's health. I see a lot of hormonal issues. I just had a conversation this morning actually with a patient, and, she basically said, well, I feel like God designed us to go through menopause, and, maybe we shouldn't really interfere with that. And I'm like, I agree by all means, but at the same time, the world that we live in is not, we've created a lot of things in our world that disrupt hormones. And so I do have a lot of conversations with my patients in the terms of, we talk about a lot about hormone disruption in, our young girls, hitting puberty early and all of these things, but we also don't talk about it after that, right? What are all of these other things doing to our hormones in our teens and in our 20s and even through menopause? I can't tell you how many women I see that are postmenopausal and they have zero hormone production left. I don't think that's the way we were meant to be, right? I still have a group of women that they're postmenopausal, not on any hormone replacement, and they still produce some of their own hormone. And then I have other groups of women that have zero hormone left, and those women do not feel well. And so again, we're doing, our diets, our lifestyle, environmental factors, a lot of those play a role into, all the way that we are synthesizing and metabolizing and breaking down all these hormones that can treat other things.
So how do you investigate in trying to discover and pinpoint what's going on in someone?
Yeah. So, most of the time I will, we'll look at hormones. So you can look at hormones a variety of different ways, whether it's through the blood, the urine, the saliva. There's different labs that recommend different things, but I always tell people you don't know if you're not looking at it yet. Again, if you have a thyroid issue, we're testing your thyroid hormones, right? But for some reason, in a more traditional medical setting, we have a really hard time looking for whatever reason at somebody's estrogen level or their progesterone level or their testosterone level. And we'll just blindly sometimes even put women on estrogen. And I've had women that are on estrogen for years and never have once had an estrogen level checked. And that's what gives hormone replacement a bad rap, is not actually seeing where people are at and what needs to be done.
Yeah. I think it's also problematic when you're just testing things in isolation because our bodies are so interconnected with all our different body systems and things like that. And we'll just go in and we'll test for this one little thing, and not get that in relation to anything else that's going on in our body.
Yeah, it's all connected and it's all complex. And, even with something as simple as a thyroid, and people are like, okay, let's look at your thyroid hormone. Great. Most of the time, they're not doing a full thyroid panel to get the full picture. And you have to have other cofactors to that. You have to have zinc and selenium and copper and iron and all those cofactors to even convert an inactive thyroid hormone to an active thyroid hormone. So sometimes even looking at those things and optimizing them, you may be able to keep somebody off of thyroid hormone replacement for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. That's great tips. I'm sure a lot of women are listening and be like, I think I need something like that. Well, I thought it would be fun to go through some women's health issues. I guess some things are hormone related. Some are just issues or choices that women make in their lives that are kind of controversial. Like some people say it's okay, some people say it's not. So I just thought I would get your feedback on some of these topics. So it's kind of like a pass or smash game for women's health.
Oh, great.
And we can kind of dive into anything that you want to give more information about. So the first one is Botox. What are your thoughts about Botox for women?
Probably something I would pass on. I know it's probably a big, it's a trend, and I think it is very important to feel good about yourself. But I think there's some different alternative options than Botox. There are some things out there about like long-term, injecting, especially injecting into the same muscle, that it can atrophy. So kind of break down that muscle over time, or just from you not being able to use that muscle with a facial expression, that muscle weakens too. And so sometimes there can be some unevenness in the musculature of the face. But there's even some newer studies coming out about maybe even some depression or some other things of people feeling flat because they aren't able to, in speaking with someone, they're not able to facial muscles to express. Yeah, that's that one, facial expressiveness. So, I think there are some more natural alternatives. There's something called frownies. I don't know if you've heard of those. They're little patches you can wear at night, and there's a lot of facial exercises and facial yoga and different red light masks and things like that can be really, I think, helpful as far as an anti-aging aspect.
Yeah, I'm a no on Botox as well. So I'm glad to hear that. Like, I feel like we're so familiar with the word Botox that we forget that it's actually like a toxin. Like it's called tox because it's botulinum toxin. Like I just doesn't make sense to like be injecting that into yourself. Yeah. So for me, in terms of health, it's definitely a no for me. Yeah. And the second one, you mentioned it a little bit already, so I would like to hear a little bit more. But what about hormone replacement therapy? HRT.
Oh, yeah. That's a yes, for me. And I think HRT is a pretty broad term in terms, hormone replacement therapy, because there's a lot of different things you can do with that. There are even some more natural options with that. Of course, prescription options, but ideally, when I'm talking about hormone replacement therapy, prescription-wise, it's more of a bioidentical hormone replacement, which basically means those molecules are biologically identical to our molecular structure, so our body sees it as if we've made it ourselves. But
is that the synthetic option?
Correct. Yep. Okay. So there's a lot of misnomers out there about hormone replacement therapy, and our moms have maybe some different views than this generation does, but there's a lot of good studies on the benefits of hormones, where from mood, sleep. I can't tell you how many women walk into my office that are started on some other medication in their 40s for things that are really actually hormone related. But a lot of times they're told, oh, this is just part of your age, it's part of perimenopause, it's part of whatever, take this. And a lot of, that's okay for some women, but for other women, they're like, man, but I just don't know that that's the correct answer for me. And so that's where, again, doing some investigation into that, because, if there is some hormone imbalance there, that there's a lot that can be done about that. Doesn't mean you have to take a prescription hormone by any means. But again, there's other cofactors, lifestyle factors, dietary changes that can affect that. But, when you're talking about even postmenopausal, perimenopausal, there's a lot of studies on, benefits from hormone replacement on bone density and cardiovascular risk and reduction of dementia and heart disease, and even just maintaining your muscle mass as you age, right? Women are kind of known to become frailer and weaker as they age, and we turn a lot of that muscle mass into fat. And so, if we can keep some of those hormones around and do some more targeted specific things, my plan is to age with grace and not to be sitting around when I'm 75. I want to be active. And I think hormones do play a role in that to a degree.
Yeah, I really love your advice to make sure that your doctor is doing some like personalized, individualized testing to really make sure that that is what you need and you're on the right dosage and that kind of thing. I think that's
I mean, like I said, you hear, I was taught in school, if somebody's having hot flashes, just give them an estrogen patch. Okay, great. But, right, sugar can increase the amount of hot flashes you have. But I think a piece of what gives hormone replacement therapy a bad taste in some people's mouth is that we're just handing out some estrogen patches and never checking somebody's estrogen level. How do you know that's what they need? How do you know you're not giving them too much? I've had plenty of women come in here overdosed on estrogen, and I'm reducing them. And a lot of that is you need progesterone to offset estrogen's negative effects and to protect the uterus and protect the breasts. And so it's a lot deeper. Women have testosterone, not to the degree that men have, but it's so important for libido and muscle mass and metabolism, right? So there's more to hormones than just estrogen.
yeah, I love that. That's a great advice. Another one that I have seen or topic that I have seen floating around, kind of not necessarily a health issue, maybe, but like in the anti-aging world or in kind of the beauty industry, and that's breast implants. I think for a long time they were just kind of something that people could do. There wasn't maybe a ton of long-term research, and so it wasn't necessarily didn't have any like negative connotations with it. But now I'm seeing a lot more women post about breast implant illness and toxicity from breast implants, depending on the materials used and things like that. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? Is this something that we should avoid, or is it okay?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to pass.
Yeah.
Again, as time goes on, you learn more things, and I do think we are seeing a lot more women now. And I think there's more information out there too as well. But I do see quite a few women that I do believe that have breast implant illness, and I have quite a few patients that have had their breast implants removed. And I don't know that I have one that has had them removed that has regretted it. Because a lot of times, when I'm taking the history on a patient and kind of doing a timeline of when did these things start happening, and you kind of break things down of, oh, they got breast implants, and then 6 months, a year, 2 years later, then they started having these symptoms, right? It's easy to not connect, but sometimes when you sit down, you can see that those dots do connect. Not for everybody. I mean, there's millions of women who have breast implants that do really well, but there's a lot of other factors, genetic factors, environmental factors, stress factors, that can contribute to that. And so really you have to think of it, any sort of implant is a foreign thing in the body, right? So our immune systems do see that as foreign. And so if the immune system already has other things, again, there's other genetic factors there that can really trigger that immune system and cause kind of that chronic immune system activation to say, wow, this is foreign, let's try to get rid of it. And so, then we do see a large link to autoimmune disease with breast implants. So a lot of things that people feel off, they're having fatigue, or they're not sleeping well, or they're having joint pain, or their mood's off. And sometimes those are vague symptoms that a lot of us deal with that can be just misattributed to other things.
Right. Yeah. I think that probably is a key, just to be aware of like the symptoms and negative, negative side effects that could happen due to breast implants. Right. And so that you can kind of be mindful of that. And like if you're, I guess some people probably wouldn't even think to like connect the dots. Right. Because
Right. Yeah.
like no idea that they could be harmful or cause problems. And so just to have that awareness of like, okay, these issues might occur if I have breast implants, and so I might just be mindful of that, right?
Yeah. Something to file away and keep in the back of the mind in case anything changes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What about cold therapy or like ice plunging for women? I've heard like pros and cons specifically for women. Like I've heard, it could be okay for men, maybe not women, but then some women are like swear by it. So I'm not sure what to think.
Yes, I'm probably more of one that I would say yes on that. I do think that women need less cold temperatures than men. So, I think they could get by with, there's some things out there about maybe doing like 50 or 55 degrees versus a colder, such an extreme as a male may need, just because of the, our fat content and muscle mass and things like that. But I do, I have had a lot of patients again that have had a lot of improvements in sleep and their mood, even like PMS symptoms and the heaviness of their cycles and the regulation of their cycles. A lot of hormone balancing I've actually seen from that. And I think some of it is, again, with the world we've created. We've created these very temperature controlled environments that we sit in the AC or we sit in the heat and or our furnace, and we don't have large temperature swings, and so we haven't had to adapt as much when people didn't have all the insulation in their homes and all the air conditioning and the heating, that our bodies had to adapt over time to those changes.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good to know. So maybe just adjusting temperature. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Our bodies are definitely different than a man's. So
Yeah.
yeah. And what about, kind of along the same lines, what about fasting for women?
Yeah, that's probably a little bit harder. I do like fasting, but I don't think it's a one size fits all. Because I think there's a lot of other factors in there too. Age is one. There is a lot out there about fasting during different phases of the cycle, and fasting based on where your hormones are at. So yes, but I think it needs to be tailored a little bit more to ages and even sometimes I'll mix fasting with a what's called a CGM, so like a continuous glucose monitor, so people can monitor their blood sugars while they're doing it, and kind of widen those windows or shorten the
I
windows.
like that idea. Yeah. So is the benefit just, I mean, one that I've heard of, just cellular repair, allowing your body to kind of get into that repair mode? Is that the benefit of fasting?
Yeah, I almost try to relate it to, survival of the fittest. Again, if you go back a couple hundred years, people didn't have food in the refrigerator, they couldn't go and grab all these snacks and eat all these things. So, sometimes people would have food and have a lot of it, right? Feast or famine. So, hey, we're going to have a lot of food today and we may not have any food tomorrow, something to that degree. So, um, yes, if you're constantly feeding those cells, right, those weaker cells are going to survive. And so sometimes if you starve them a little bit, the weaker ones will die off, and it kind of forces your body to generate some newer, stronger cells.
Okay. So if I want to implement this, I maybe should just kind of learn the timing of it, like when it's best during my cycle, when I could go longer, when I need to go shorter, things like that.
Yeah, there's a good book. She's a chiropractor. Her name is Mindy Pels. She has a book called Fast Like a Girl.
Okay.
So she has a lot of good information. That's a really good resource to kind of tailor that. I have a lot of patients that read it. They don't follow it to a T, but it gives them good information to figure out what may fit best for their lifestyle. Because I'm always big too on, I don't want to tell somebody to do something that then is just going to create, it's just another stressor in their life of not do this, right? It's about finding balance. So, sometimes we don't always have to follow something to a T, but if we can implement some good pieces of that can be really helpful.
Okay, awesome. I'll link that book in the show notes for people. What about GLP-1s like Ozempic and Wegovy and things like that?
Yeah, this is a hard one too. I would probably say I'm in the middle. Maybe a little bit more on the yes side, and I say that with some caution because I have prescribed some GLP-1s. I do not hand them out to every single patient by any means. You've got, some places that kind of hand them to anybody that walks in the door. And I think some people are taking too high of doses on them, and so they've lost a lot of weight rapidly. They lose, a lot of the fat in their face and a lot of muscle mass, essentially, that comes with it. So I think for the right candidate, yes. But I do think, some of them are even approved now for sleep apnea.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And so, but I have seen, I have a couple patients that I've put them on because we have done everything. I've got their hormones balanced out. they're sleeping well, they're doing well, they're eating well, everything is well. And they're like, I still can't lose weight. And I'm like, and we've literally done everything. We've gone down all these rabbit holes to try to look at all these other environmental factors. And their big complaint is still, I cannot lose weight. So in those people, I'm like, hey, maybe we try a GLP-1. And so, and they've done really well. I have personally seen a lot of CRPs, which is a blood marker to measure inflammation. I've seen a lot of inflammation drop. I've seen a lot of cholesterol levels drop. I've seen, a lot of, even some of my autoimmune patients, a lot of their symptoms improve. So I do think there are a lot of pros to them. I think there are some cons to them as well, for sure. Like, the muscle mass changes, you have to be doing some working out and some weightlifting if you're on any of those. And I'm a big proponent of taking less, less is best. If we can keep you on the lowest dose to get whatever desired effect that we're taking it for is ideal, because if you increase the dose, you may just increase the risk of the side effects and other risks that come with it. So
somebody decides to take it, what's the time frame that you would recommend as far as, is this a long-term medication or a short-term solution?
yeah, my goal is really just a short term. I do have some people that are like, I just feel better on it. I can't explain why. I want to stay on it. That's a different discussion. But my goal is to get people off of them. Again, like there's all a balance in life. And, and I'm all for that. Is a big piece is to, like the example I gave about, the patient I've done everything with. And the big complaint is she's feeling well, but she still can't lose weight. And, I always tell patients, if I had the magic answer to why somebody couldn't lose weight, I'd be retired. Like that's a huge complaint for a lot of people. And it's much deeper than just sometimes diet and hormones. Mm-hmm. And so, in that patient that I did use it on, she did lose weight and she felt great. And she got off of it after about 6 months and she maintained her weight. So, it has to come with some dietary education, some working out with a plan to get off of it, because, for some people that are taking it and they're not doing a lot of other lifestyle changes, they'll either will be on it long term or they'll gain all their weight back if that's why they're taking it for weight when we start it. So I think there's a lot more ins and outs to be had there with some responsible prescribing and some work on the patient side as well.
Yeah, I think responsible prescribing is really important as well, because I have heard a lot of stories where, women went in because they saw it on a commercial and they're like, I want to try this. And the doctor said, okay. And then they ended up having some bad side effects or came off of it and had effects, side effects that they weren't expecting after. So that patient education is a really important piece, I feel like, with this medication that a lot of women aren't getting. So just as a thought for anyone listening, if this is something you're considering, just make sure you do your research and have a provider that's willing to have that conversation with you.
Yeah. And we even, for example, we have a dietitian in our office. And so our office rule is if anybody's on a GLP-1, they have to see the dietitian for the 6 months, at least 6 months. That if they're on it longer than 6 months, okay, that may be a different, conversation. But if you're on it and you're on it for 6 months, you're going to be seeing that dietitian every month. And so again, it's, and some people don't like that, and that's okay. But that's kind of a compromise on our end.
Yeah. Well, let's go to an easy one, because I think I already know the answer. But what do you feel? How do you feel about red light therapy?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a yes. I have a red light mask that I use, and when I'm consistent with it, because I'm not perfect, I can tell a difference in my skin. I sleep better. I'll usually let that at night and wear it, and I sleep better on the nights that I wear it. Again, kind of like back with anti-aging and some of the Botox conversation was, it improves collagen production, and even with there's some improvements in hair growth and some cellular repair aspects, and even there's some things coming out about improving wound healing, right? So it is important to get a good there's different wavelengths and things like that. Just because something's red doesn't mean that you're going to get that red light benefit. But
right.
But there's a lot, even outside of red light, there's a lot of other studies on what's called chromotherapy, which is different lights and different, different wavelengths, different colors of light with different benefits. But yeah, I think red light is probably here to stay. And I think
Yay. I do like red light therapy as well, so I'm glad that that's a pass. People ask me, it's like, well, what do you use it for? And I was like, it's literally almost everything, because it's something that's like targeting like cellular healing. So that could literally benefit almost anything.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yay. What about medicinal mushrooms for women? I have just seen so many like social media ads, especially like about medicinal mushroom coffee and supplements, and
Right.
for all kinds of, they claim like all kinds of benefits, and there's different mushrooms that do different things. And so I don't know, is this something that you use in your practice or that you like?
Yeah, I do use it some. I will say that the big thing with mushrooms, I do like it. But the big thing is you have to be consistent. And so you have to take them consistently over time to get the full benefit. So I find a lot of people, if they're doing any type of, mushroom, cordyceps, lion's mane, anything like that, sometimes they'll take something if they're doing coffee, some sort of tea, or in a supplement form. Sometimes I'll find they take it and they're like, well, I don't really know that it helped me, so I stopped.
I mean, it doesn't help me like in 1 week. It's just like, I don't think this is working.
So that's the big thing is you got to give it some time. You have to be consistent. They've been around since the beginning of time. And so, if I'm very big on, food is medicine and some of that. So I do think there's a lot of benefits that we can get from them. Something like a reishi, really probably helpful to take more in the evening because it can help with sleep. You've got like cordyceps, better to take it in the morning because it can be energizing. So there's little caveats there that, sometimes aren't always explained in, maybe some Instagram reels and things like that. But
Right.
again, there's a lot of them that are adaptogenic, so helping with stress, and even some things, of course, a lot on the immune system side. I do use them a lot for probably immune support and a lot for like the more of gut health and the microbiome.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Good to know. Just probably look for a good quality one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take it.
Organic, third party tested, really important. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. I have a couple pharmaceutical questions. So the first one is SSRIs, because we started this conversation talking about just how women's health in general is really in decline. And one of those things that we're seeing increase so much is depression and anxiety, mental health issues in women. So what are your opinions about, medicating for depression and anxiety and things like that?
Yeah. I think, again, I think this kind of goes back to the word I said earlier, responsible prescribing. I think there's a time and a place for everything. Obviously, if somebody's had a big life event, they had a divorce or a death, something like that, by all means, if you need a medication, let's do it. But I tell my patients, when I start you on something, my goal is to get you off of it. But a lot of times there's underlying factors, right? If there hasn't been a big life event or something else going on, and we're having lower motivation, feeling depressed, having a lot of anxiety, I prefer to work with my patients on, and most of my patients that come to me are wanting the same thing too. But let's work and figure out, is there something underlying that's going on that's contributing to you feeling this way? And hormones are a big piece of that. I have a lot of women in their 30s and 40s that are started on an SSRI for depression, anxiety, and for some of them it helps. Others, they're like, this didn't help me. I don't want to be on it. I know that's not the reason that I'm feeling this way. Can you help me figure it out? And so, looking at hormones as a whole, and I tell my patient that's your sex hormones, your stress hormones, and then your thyroid hormones, right? And kind of putting all those pieces together. But even, B vitamins are important, huge with, some mood aspects. And there's just a lot of natural things too, with a lot of studies that back them up on things that we can use for mood improvements,
Yeah. Have you found a connection between gut health and depression, like working on gut health, helping depression as well?
For sure. And anxiety, huge For some people it may sound crazy, but even with a food, right? If something's inflammatory to you and it's triggering that immune system, how your immune system and how your body responds could be altering your mood. I can't tell you how many patients that we've identified, hey, they may be sensitive to something and they pull it out of their diet and their anxiety improves. And, just the microbiome in general, we know there's certain bacteria that are linked, and there's more studies coming out all the time that the bacteria in the gut communicate with the brain. And hey, that gut brain connection may be deeper than we once thought. So, yeah, huge.
Okay. These next two are kind of pharmaceutical related as well, but could also apply even, I think, to teen girls. And the first one is hormonal birth control. Pass or smash?
I would pass on that. Again, there may be a time and a place in certain situations, but I think there's a lot of other more natural options as far as, if we're needing birth control as far as pregnancy prevention goes. But I think, again, birth control is overused, outside of trying to prevent pregnancy in terms of, acne and heavy periods and irregular periods and a lot of other things that come up that it's just like, well, let's just start some birth control. There's a lot of people don't think sometimes of birth control as actually being hormones, right? I've had people come into my office and say, hey, I want to get my hormones balanced. I think my hormones are off, and they're taking birth control. And so I have to have a discussion with them that's like, hey, I'm more than happy to help you with this. But you are already taking hormones, and your hormones are being augmented from the birth control. And so we usually have a discussion about maybe coming off of it and seeing how they feel, and then looking at hormones outside of that, because really birth control really suppresses our hormones. And so it keeps at this very low, steady state all the time. So we lose that natural ebb and flow throughout the month. And some people are more sensitive to that fall in that steady state of hormones, and we need those different hormones being released throughout the month. And there's just a lot of other side effects that aren't talked about a lot with birth control, as far as maybe some later on fertility concerns. They do deplete many vitamins, including B12, reduced libido, weight gain, increased anxiety and depression. So again, there's likely, for a large percentage of people, maybe some different options.
I love it. All right. Good to know. What about pass or smash on the HPV vaccine for teens, Gardasil or something like that?
Yeah. So, this is a controversial topic.
Putting you on the spot.
And sometimes I have to toe a fine line on that. But what I would say is vaccines are not a one size fits all, and that's what they've turned into. I know we've seen a lot of reports come out about the HPV vaccine specifically, and these teen girls, when they're getting it, have a lot of issues. Even some strokes, and some girls that are paralyzed and different things after that, and having some long-term issues. So, a lot of HPV, I'd recommend people to do their research. A lot of HPV self-resolves. A very large, like 98% of HPV, I believe, I think, don't maybe quote me on that statistic, but it's a very high 90s percentage that certain forms of HPV will self-resolve. And so I think, maybe more education aspect on how can we, prevent our risk of getting HPV, and things that we can do. And again, kind of on the flip side, even supporting the immune system, because it is a virus. And if we can support our immune system to kind of fight that off and help it to self-resolve, I think that would be ideal.
I love the encouragement.
I have a daughter. I don't plan on having her get the HPV vaccine.
Yeah, I'm a pass on for my daughters as well. I mean, I'm not a provider, not medical advice, but some moms, I feel like, don't know that they have that option to delay or deny, a recommended vaccine. So you do have that option. You can do your research, and you can delay, you can accept, you can decline. Those are all valid options. So
Yeah, absolutely. And no one should ever make you feel bad about whatever your decision is, because I like to think as mothers, most of us would not do anything to intentionally harm our children. And so you need to find somebody that's supportive in whatever you decide for yourself and your family.
good. Amen. How do you feel about low fat diets for women?
No.
Passing.
Tapped on that. Our brain is at least 60% fat or more. We need fats for our mood and our focus. There's somebody in the functional world that basically says he wants everybody to be fat heads. Having a lot of fat, you need the fat for your brain, reduces your Alzheimer's risk. We must have fats for our sex hormone production. If you don't get enough fat, it's going to mess with your fertility. It's going to mess with your cycle. A lot of, you've got vitamins A, D, E, and K that are fat soluble. You need fat to be able to store those.
Yep.
Fat keeps us full. It helps regulate our blood sugar and our insulin. You gotta have fat. It's not, the 90s kind of brought in a lot of the low fat kind of things. And really that just created a lot more ingredients in foods and a lot more sugar in those low fat forms to make them taste better. So,
Yeah.
I'd get the full fat sour cream versus the low fat or the full fat yogurt, whatever you're doing. We need lots of good fats.
Good. I just made a post yesterday, not even thinking about the timing of this question, about how we need to not be afraid of fat, especially as women. There's so much low fat marketing out there with, diet foods and things like that. And so I love that. I'm trying to teach my daughters to, not be afraid of that and to make sure actually be really intentional about, getting those healthy fats, those, essential fatty acids and things like that into their diets.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Next one is weighted vests, a little trendy right now. Is it a thing that you think should stick around, or would you pass or smash on weighted vests for women?
I like weighted vest. I think it's a great thing, especially if you're working out at home. You don't have a lot of other equipment to work out with. I think it's a great option for strength training at home. Wearing it on a run or a walk or whatever you're doing. It adds some extra resistance to different body weight movements. It increases the muscle engagement. Even on the weight aspects, it increases the bone building activity. So, increased bone density. You're going to, burn more calories per se in that workout. So I think it's an easy addition.
All right, everybody put it on your Amazon wish list. Also, yeah, I have gotten one. I do like to wear it when I'm just going for walks around my neighborhood and stuff like that. It makes me feel like I'm, doing something a little extra, like it's getting something significant in. Yeah. What about mammograms?
I do get that question a lot from patients. There is about a 10% false positive rate for a mammogram. And so basically my point of that is, if you're doing a mammogram once a year, as recommended, usually your risk that you fall within that is you have about a 50 to 60% chance. So 1 in 2 women will at least get a call back to say, hey, we saw something on your mammogram. Come back, which, isn't necessarily wrong, but I actually did a paper on this in grad school, interestingly enough, on the false positive rates of mammograms. But it adds more stress to the patient, right? It increases healthcare costs. You're then doing more tests like, hey, we need to repeat the mammogram. Most of the time when they see something on a mammogram, they then will recommend an ultrasound to get a different view, and then sometimes an MRI of the breast. So they all look at things a little bit differently. You do have some radiation risks that comes with mammogram too. So, I tend to lean more a little bit on the side of the fence. I'm always, my patient wants to do a mammogram, great, I'll send you an order. But if I have somebody that's questioning it, for sure, I do like an ultrasound as a screener. I like thermography as well. Thermography is looking at heat. I would say the big thing with thermograms is you really need to get a a baseline thermogram before you have any concerns, because a lot of that is looking back at those, results to compare, was this here the last time or not? But outside of that, I do like ultrasounds because you don't have the radiation
Yeah.
risk with it. They can get a decent view. If they see anything on that, okay, then, that's a discussion of what do we do next? Do we do the mammogram at that point? Do you do a breast MRI? MRIs don't have radiation either. But again, I think it's not a one size fits all, like we've
Right.
things to be. And I think, again, you have to think of that cumulative risk of the radiation exposure of a mammogram every year. And then if you've got other radiation exposures throughout time, it's just that cumulative risk. So I think if you're doing yearly screening, maybe an ultrasound is a better alternative, or thermography, in looking at your options that way. The unfortunate part about that is insurance tends to only want to cover a screening mammogram. And so if somebody's opting for thermography or an ultrasound, they're going to most likely pay for it out of pocket.
Right. I hope that changes in the future. I do feel like more women are looking for different options, and, some of the not so great sides of mammography are becoming more well known, right? And I mean, it's also not a cancer prevention. I guess that's one of the big things that really bothers me, is that, breast cancer awareness month comes around and they just want everybody to get a mammogram, and that's the only thing that they tell women to do
Right.
for breast cancer. And it's not in any way a preventative measure, right? So we should be talking about breast health year round, and we should be like talking about prevention and actual breast health, not just one type of screening.
Absolutely. And I think that even, boils down to, we don't do a great job of preventing a lot of things in our health in the US, and our health care system really isn't set up for that. We're more set up to take care of somebody when something happens.
Right.
And so it there definitely needs to be more preventative aspect, across everywhere. And I usually kind of explain that to patients, because like in our office, we don't take insurance, and there's multiple reasons for that. But I kind of explain it to patients in the sense of like your car insurance. Your car insurance covers when you get into a wreck and, you have hail damage or something like that. Your car insurance doesn't cover your brakes and your gas and your oil and your tires, all the things that keep your car running. And we don't have any problem paying for that, right? But then when it comes to health insurance, there's this thought around, well, I pay my insurance company, why aren't they paying for these things? Which I don't disagree with, but unfortunately it's not set up that way. And so to try to keep yourself well, sometimes you kind of have to go outside of that insurance realm. And so, I'm big. I wish we would do more of full body MRIs. That's probably a different discussion too in the US. They do them in a lot of other countries in Europe and things like that, as basically a yearly screening, where they do a full body MRI just to see what they see. And so, again, if we were doing that, maybe we could avoid mammograms as well. So.
Right. Yeah. And I know MRIs are expensive, but if we were doing that, we would really probably save money in the long run of having to run other tests, or, other things come up that we didn't see coming. So yeah, I agree. As we kind of wrap up, what are your thoughts that we haven't talked about regarding women's health? Like, what would you like to leave women with as far as, I don't know, maybe your own personal approach to health for yourself, or, with the knowledge and wisdom that you've gained seeing clients? Like, what do women really need to prioritize to, to live a healthy life? And not just talking about, healthy as in looking good in a bikini this summer, but for longevity, right? Like you said, you want to be 75 and you want to be active, thinking long term like that. What are the things that we really need to have top of mind?
I would say my number one is actually sleep. I tell all my patients, you'd be surprised how many women are not sleeping well. They're having a hard time falling asleep, waking up in the night, or they're just really not getting a good deep sleep. Sleep is huge. There's a lot that flows into that too. So my number one is you have to be getting sleep. Nothing's going to get better down to the cellular level until you're sleeping. And I think outside of that is, as women, we always, put other things first, our children's, our spouses, our jobs. And so I always encourage people, you have to take time to yourself, try to do 30 minutes a day. I know that doesn't sound like a lot. And for some people that sounds like a lot. But if you can do 30 minutes a day of something that is for you, that's stress relieving for you. So if that's going on a walk, reading a book, in prayer, whatever it is, like you got to carve out that time for you time. And then, of course, exercise is huge, in diet, things of that sort. And I think outside of that is just listening to your body and being your own advocate and being proactive. I always encourage people, don't sit around and kind of wait for something to happen or, wait for it to get worse. There's a lot of things that we've chalked up to being normal, as women, as far as mood changes or heavy periods or, even weight concerns, right? There's a lot of things that we've kind of just been told it's normal or not given a lot of information on, but a lot of it isn't normal. We should and we deserve to feel really well and to feel well about ourselves. And so if any of that's going on, then you need to find somebody that will listen to you, that will help you investigate, that will take a proactive approach with you. Because if you don't know, you don't know, and knowledge is power. And there's so many things you can do and have a partner, whether it's a health coach, a dietitian, somebody, a workout buddy, somebody in a life group at church, somebody to be by your side, but you need someone that can be your sideline cheerleader and help you to do things for yourself.
Awesome. And if somebody wants to keep learning from you, maybe even work with you, what's the best way to connect?
The best way really is probably to, you can go to our website, call our office. We have really great staff. We're at 417 Integrative Medicine, which is just 417integrativemedicine.com, or you can call our office as well if you need more information.
All right. Do you work with people remotely, virtually, or is it all in person?
Right now it's all, well, we're only licensed in Missouri. And so, theoretically, yes, I can do telemedicine, but it's only for Missouri residents. If I see somebody in person, they can come from wherever. And we do have people travel from other states, but virtual is a little limited with some state law.
All right. And Micah is in Southwest Missouri, for those of you that missed that. Yeah. All right. We'll put all your contact info in the show notes. Thank you so much, not just for being with me here today, but thank you for doing what you're doing. I told you before that I'm so thrilled to have an office and practice like yours in my area. It's so important. And so thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.